Thank you, Pedro. Thank you very much for this invitation. I hope you can see and hear me okay, everybody? Yes, great. David Mamet, the US playwright, said, people may or may not say what they mean, but they always say something designed to get what they want. So Leskovich, La théorie du sens. So the interpretive theory of translation. In a nutshell, ideas, not words. It helps you, for instance, in consecutive already to triangulate so that you are analyzing and you have something else before you are expressing. That then is applied to simultaneous with the time lag. The décalage and the reformulation is all about what's happening in the middle. You have listened, and while you are engaging with ideas, something else is happening, which is not listening and is not yet expression. And that, if you like, is the concept of interpreting. So often, the dilemma about English words from an English B is a false dilemma, because the real dilemma is the analysis of the idea. So the actor needs to know the motivation, not what does my character say, but why does my character say it? No director ever says to an actor, be sad now, right? Just like you can't say to an interpreter, these are some Spanish words, now say these words in English. Huge danger I see with retour is that you're hearing words, and if you don't do this deep analysis, then what you think you are trying to say is in fact not meaningful to your listener, because it is not authentic. It is not authentically linked to what anybody wants to say. It's just some words. I think it's almost impossible to be ready when you haven't had the life experience in the other language. But you have to sort of fake that in some way or another. So mock conferences, simulations of the professional environment where you wear different hats, I think can be absolutely crucial. You have to create a character yourself, which requires your imagination. Like an actor, you have some ingredients given to you, and you have some direction given to you by the director, which would be the context of the conference, the pragmatics of what are people achieving from this negotiation, from the rhetoric, from this event. Playing the customer, playing the speaker, playing the checker are all interesting roles. What's it like to be a bilingual who's paid good money for an interpreter and suspects that maybe they're not giving much added value? Are you really an evil monster who's trying to destroy the profession? Or are you just a human being who's really more interested in the specialized topic of the conference and just wants to check that the interpreting is going okay? Either way, find out, be that person. You don't want the very first sentence you ever say about nuclear physics into a microphone to be the one key introduction by the world expert. You want to have said something else first to kind of play around with it, just like an actor warming up. So you can do a warm-up exercise where you have a little debate with your classmates and you play these roles. If a pure customer says, thank you, I got something from you that I would not have got otherwise because I don't speak the language, don't say, but most of that vocabulary wasn't right and it would have been better if you'd been listening to a native speaker. That is not the right reply. Right reply is, good, I'm pleased you got something from me. I'm doing my job okay. Some people go through their entire career without ever realizing how awful they sound to everybody else. So if you realize how awful you sound, celebrate that fact. That's an achievement as well in itself. Somebody gets to the end of the course and they fail. So what does that mean and how do we measure it? You can have a professional yardstick and you just say you should have got here. But if you're guiding somebody and taking them step by step, then you have a joint responsibility for going through those steps. So my main criticism of your work is you don't sound convincing. You need to sound more convincing, because the student is doing what you've asked them to do. You didn't ask them to sound convincing, but now the criticism is that they didn't. And that is not pedagogical. So the pedagogical approach is to say, in today's class, I want you to listen to this speech and I want you to try to reproduce the content in another language, but I want you to pay particular attention to how this sounds, because the aim of the speaker is to convince the Spanish-speaking audience. Your aim at every moment in your interpretation is to convince the English-speaking audience. You have to create the communication situation in which the motivation is clear. Your sentences from Spanish are huge and unmanageable. And okay, they are huge and maybe unmanageable in the original, but somehow the speaker lands on their feet and they make it sound elegant for a Spanish-speaking audience. What comes out in English is not manageable and it is not elegant, and everybody thinks the interpreter is kind of out of control. So we need to isolate elements and then give self-contained sentences in English and say who does what. And that can be a minimal amount. I am hedging my bets a little bit, but I'm doing it in a grammatically complete and elegant way in the English language. There is an aesthetic and technical justification for saying something before we know what we're talking about. So we use a filler. The big danger is to think, I have to start interpreting. So you try to interpret something which you do not understand and which is not a complete idea to you. And if you do that, the huge danger is that what you say in English will say too much. You will be putting words in the mouth of the speaker. Before asking the simultaneous interpreter what the intention is, ask the consecutive interpreter what the intention is. And before asking the consecutive interpreter what the intention is, ask somebody who's just speaking to a monolingual audience what their intention is. And before even doing that, pick an intention yourself and give your own speech and think about how you were consciously reflecting your intention in your own speech. My approach is to start with the voice as the instrument, that the listener perceives a voice and then deciphers the voice in order to understand a message, and then gets an idea which is comprised of words. So because the listener perceives it in that order, if we think in that order, rather than I've got some words, now I'm going to say them, we're communicating in a different way. All of which leads me to the conclusion that the voice is not an added extra. It's not an optional extra. And I think it's only when we become self-conscious of it that it becomes excessive. So that would be the example from acting. If you're watching an actor on stage and you suddenly become aware that they are acting. Right? They're doing some acting. And then they're not. It's not working because you're not seeing the character. If you see the actor, not the character, then they're not acting. They're failing to act. So what looks like excessive acting is a failure to act. And often when students say, what would you do in this situation, kind of professional ethics thing, what should an interpreter do? Just turn it back and put the student in that situation. Say, you're the delegate. What do you want your interpreter to do? And very often they will answer their own question. So to a trainer too, I can often say, put yourself in the student's position. What would you want your trainer to do? So by all of us kind of coming together and discussing and putting on our different hat for a moment and playing that role, I think we can all learn from each other. I hope so. Anyway, even with this short time available.